out amongst the children. So that's how you, I've often had people come into a classroom going, where's the teacher? And they can't find me. That's a good sign. But my name is Carissa Swiss. As Kevin introduced me, I am the director and an assistant professor at Chestnut Hill College for the Montessori program. I'm the first full-time professor that they've hired specifically for the Montessori program. So that was a great honor a couple of years ago. And just recently, I became the director also of the program. So a lot of juggling hats. I come to you, I did not start out as a Montessorian. I was an architect. So I went to Carnegie Mellon, I got my architecture degree. I ended up designing, I became licensed and ended up designing schools. And it was a really interesting happenstance that I was presenting to a school board and they said that I was arguing to keep woodshop and home economics in the curriculum. Because I said there's so much more going on, there's a whole process here. And what the student, this was way before I became a Montessorian. And so the school board president came over and he said, have you ever thought about getting into education? I'm like, no, not even thought. My sister introduced me to Montessori. When she was 9 years old, I take that back, we were 9 years apart. When she was 5 years old, I was 14, I'm in high school, and she comes home one day and says, I want to give you a lesson on division. And I thought, okay, this ought to be interesting. And she actually showed me how they do division in Montessori and teaching this concept of sharing. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. I'm in ninth grade, and I have friends that don't know how to do division or motion. You know, they couldn't explain it the way she did. So I always thought, when I have children, I want them to go to Montessori. Fast forward, had a child. We moved to an area where there was a Montessori school. I enrolled her. Unbeknownst to me, at that time, I didn't know enough about the program, so I had her in 2 days a week. And because they offered that in the area I was in. And that was I didn't know. And they offered 2 days because 3-year-olds only went to preschool 2 days a week. And when I finally learned more about Montessori, they went in 5 days a week. She went in 5 days a week. And what a difference, I noticed this whole thing. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how that influenced her and where she is today. Second child came along automatically, 5 days a week, no question in my mind. But I loved it. And my older one came home and she said, Mom, I don't know the name of the brown continent. I'm looking at her now. Maybe you've had questions come home like that, where they're like, okay, I'm struggling with this, I don't know, and you're talking about, like, thinking, what are they talking about? So I had to go and find out, what is this brown continent that she's talking about? And then we realized it was called Australia, because they showed me the map. Now I refer to it as Oceania now, so if I confuse anybody, but at the time it was Australia. She's 26 now, so that was a while ago. We just decided, she said, this is what she told me, this is how I figured it out. Mom, kangaroos are indigenous to that continent. And I was just like, okay, here we go. So kangaroos hop on a trail, Australia, and that's how she remembered it. So we came up with this little thing. I was hooked. And so from that point on, I decided, okay, I need to reevaluate where I am because I love this. What are they doing? What are they showing her that she's coming home? Now, she went to school, and they came out the first day and said, she can write her name. I said, yeah, that was just something that she did. But it was an interesting partnership then with the school because they were finding out things that we did with her at home, and I was finding out what they did with her at school. And from that moment, I was really hooked on this, and I decided I'm going to change my career. So here I am now. I'm credentialed for ages 2.5 through 12, so that's primary, junior, and if you had an upper level, it would be the upper level as well. How many of you here are primary parents of primary children? Do we have parents of junior level children? Anybody here who doesn't have children at the school yet? Okay, oh, even better. So what I'm going to talk about tonight, so that's how I ended up here. Spent a lot of time working with primary children and mostly lower elementary through 5th grade, which takes us in the junior year and up into what we call elementary 1, elementary 2. But one of the things that's really important that I always try to focus on is the fact that our skills that we need for the future, we can't predict today in terms of jobs. What jobs are they going to need? So we need to prepare children for whatever is going to happen in the future. And that's one of the main reasons why I love Montessori, because it's been doing this, we do this indirectly all the time, every day, in what we do with our children. And one of the important things is to know, how do we support that at home when your children come home, and what does it look like during the day when they're here all day at school? So how do we make that transition? And how do you make that transition when they're here and they start and they're in the primary level to moving up to the junior level? How does Montessori work? So tonight I want to talk about, as you read, problem solving and critical thinking skills, and why they're so important, and how Montessori is really set up to elaborate on those. And some of the things, I'm not going to go into the history of Dr. Montessori, but one of the things you'll notice, I don't have a PowerPoint presentation. How many things do you go to? There's always a PowerPoint presentation. So instead, what I just did was, everybody has a handout, because usually you say, I go to all these conferences and they're like, can I have the slides for that? There's pens on the table should you want to take notes as well. If there's anything, there will not be a quiz. Montessori doesn't do quizzes. We do ask a lot of questions though, and that's going to be the key thing tonight. And so I'm going to be asking some of you, all of you, questions. Some of you might even venture out to actually answer some of them. So tonight, my goals are to go over what critical thinking skills are. We all hear that term. What does it really mean? And where are some of the ones that really resonate with the Montessori method? How are they part of Montessori? And then some of the things that you can go home and do with your children. They work great with other adults as well, as I've learned. So that's been one of my, one of the things I do now, working with adult learners. So, let's see. We had a number of, how many of you were junior level parents? Do we have one of you? Okay. So some of the things I'm going to start with, when I start talking about, are going to be more for the early childhood. And if you look at the little piece of paper I gave you, you'll see some things that are early childhood, how they relate to elementary. We'll talk about how they get to, how we can tie those in at home. But to highlight, anybody have an idea about critical thinking skills? I know I have some things listed on there, but does anybody know what critical thinking really is? And it's a difficult concept, and we hear the term all the time, but really, what is critical thinking? So, critical thinking is a systematic evaluation of information to make reasoned judgments. So essentially, it's really to gather all the information before making a decision, before potentially voicing an opinion. You want to make sure you have enough information, and we want to figure out what information should we be believing in, because we all want to find information that supports what we believe in. I just took the GRE. Anybody here take the GRE? So yes, I'm applying for my doctorate, so I haven't taken the GRE. I haven't taken a standardized test in 30 years. So all of a sudden, I have this issue essay that you have to write, and you have to take a position on what question they ask. And you have to be able to think critically. You have to be able to justify it. And you have to see both sides of the story, because they want you to be able to address, you might have an opinion one way, what's the opposing side, and why is your side better? That's critical thinking. That's the essence of it. And so if you're thinking, where does this apply to children? Well, they're going to be thinking critically every day when they're looking out in their world. You wouldn't be here if you didn't think, we want to make sure our children are thinking, and how they're thinking is going to help them in the future. So one of the things, one of the key skills, observation. How many of you observed something today in your daily life? You did. So, anybody want to share what they've observed? Anything that went on today? No?
That clock is wrong.
That's a great observation, because I kept looking at it, people were going, oh my God.
Driving me crazy.
Great. Yeah.
I observed how people who didn't know each other introduced themselves on a call in a meeting.
Anything else?
How dark it's getting, so
How about
How dark it is, so
Yes, it is getting dark earlier now, and that will continue. So sometimes those observation skills can be very powerful. They can tell us things. They can't tell us the time, unfortunately, but they can tell us other things. Observing the seasons, knowing those things, taking time out of your day. Now, it could be anything. It could be something related to work. But look around right now and see, and just observe the environment that we're in, because we don't take the time to do that. But children do, and we want to encourage them to do that, because they're going to look and then they're going to see that clock and they're going to say, what time is it? Right? They're going to, wait a minute, what time does that clock say? So then they're going to read the clock, and well, that's wrong. How off is it? How do we fix that clock? Who's going to fix that clock? How do we get up there to fix that clock? Do you hear all the questions that are coming out of this? So anytime they see something, those are the things that we want to encourage them to do. We want them to be looking around to observe. And where does that translate? They're able to visualize things. They're comparing things. They're evaluating things. So in our Montessori environments, we encourage children to observe. And one of the things I'm going to get to is how when we do lessons in primary level, I'm going to call it early childhood because there are multiple ways of referring to that same topic, same level, ages 3 to 6, 2.5 to 6. But lessons are predominantly given in silence because we want them to observe. We don't want them to try to listen to us. If I had a PowerPoint presentation behind me, you'd all be trying to read what I write. And how many presentations have you been to that have so many words on them that you're trying to read that and listen at the same time? They've done studies on this. You can't process everything at the same time. So that's why we really want to work on that observation skill. Observation is also really important that it's done in silence and done quietly, because that's when you're able to take that information in and really process it. So keep that in mind. So if you've observed in the school, in any school, anything that you go to, take time to observe in silence and see what happens, see what you notice. I know this sounds like a mindfulness seminar, but it's not. But that's important to mindfulness as well. So, curiosity. Has anybody been curious today about anything? I was curious how I was going to get in the building because when I arrived, the doors were all locked. But when you take a moment and you think about what inspired curiosity, okay, what have you experienced today that you've been more curious about? Is there something you wanted to learn more about? So how many emails did you get where they're trying to sell you something? That might not be a good idea to be curious about that, but it could be. The holidays are coming, there are gifts to be bought. But think about, what were you curious about today? And think about your children. How curious are they? They're curious about everything, right? What is this? What does that say? What color is this pen going to write? Is it going to be green because the outside is green? Little things like that. Continue. Curiosity leads to being able to evaluate things, maybe make inferences, interpret things, and question things. So we want to encourage that curiosity. Creativity. Anybody here in a creative profession? what are you?
I do, I agree, online education courses where test prep exam. So some like analytical part of it, but also there's some creativity involved as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're the people that I don't like because you're too creative for Yeah.
Maybe you'd like us if you use it.
No, I appreciate that. But there is creativity in that. And it's really interesting, those are some of the things. As an architect, I always thought, that's a creative field. Where does that, how do you get to that point? I had 2 students and it was wonderful. They had lessons on the pink tower, if you're familiar with that, and what that is, the brown stair. And they're using the materials, and I'm watching, they're very respectful of the materials, it was wonderful. But what they were creating, I just sat back and I watched them. I didn't ask any questions, I just watched. And when they got done, what they assembled, to me, I'm looking at this thinking, there's Frank Lloyd Wright right there. I was looking at them and I'm thinking, wow, they have created this balanced architectural composition. And if I had interrupted that and interrupted their creativity, they wouldn't have been able to express whatever it was. And I let them tell me about it. And that moment, we all try to jump in, oh, what are you doing? We want them to tell us about it, or I like this, or great, good job. We won't go there. We want them to tell us, we want them to be excited. We don't want to tell them, we don't want to evaluate them. So their creativity is going to allow them to show you where they are with design. They can go into designing things, planning. How much planning do they, can they, figure out? Are they going to be our next urban planners, our next, I'm trying to think of other just our organizational people. Are they going to be our next directors of movies? We don't know them, but we want to open that up to them. Analysis. We're all doing a lot of analysis. Again, that comparing, organizing, and integrating of skills. These are some of the things that are really critical for them to do. And we'll show you through the work that, some of the things that we're going to show tonight, where they can take that analysis and what they're going to do with it. And then the last one is this idea of problem solving. Dr. Walsh, would you come and solve a problem for me? Would you come and show us the knob cylinder? It's a knob cylinder block. And I will move my legs off. So one of the things with problem solving, we hypothesize, we check, we experiment, and we reason. This is, this is one of the first books that we introduce. And the child has to solve the problem of which knob cylinder goes into which hole. And it seems like fairly obvious to us, right? We can see it, we know, we understand this thing, but the children don't. And they'll take them out. Yeah, Dr. Walsh took them out so nice and neatly, and that's how we demonstrate. Did you say anything? Except for to ask me a couple of questions, but complete silence. That's how we show the children to do this. This way they're focused on what our hands are doing, and then focused on how she's putting them back. Now we shortened this a little bit. There are some additional steps that we show. But you can see that if a child took the thinnest, narrowest knob cylinder and they put it in a larger hole, that's going to be a problem when they go to put that larger one away because something else is in its place. So then they have to reevaluate. It's like a little mini experiment. Okay, if that one doesn't go there, what one goes next? And we build on that. There are 4 of those knob cylinders, and one of the most exciting works that children get to do is they get to put the 4 knobs, they empty all the cylinders out on a rug on one side of the room, and on the other side of the room, they take those blocks and they put them on the other side of the room, all 4 of them. And, or they can even build it right around those, but to make it really challenging for my students, they would have to remember, take one, go over, figure out where it goes. Or they'd have a friend who would put a pencil in one of the holes, and they'd have to go to the other side of the room to remember what size they were getting. And they'd have to figure that out. They have to think. It challenges them automatically to figure out. I'm getting a call too at the same time. Just an alarm. So that's one way that we automatically teach children to problem solve with our Montessori materials. And have we done anything? We've used the material, the child will do that themselves. And that's one of those things that I think is really part of the genius of Montessori, is that when some of these materials that she designed, the didactic materials, serve such a purpose that it encourages children. They don't even realize what they're doing, and they build on that skill. Absolutely.
When the child is really curious about something and wanting to learn about anything, and when we have many questions about it, and the child is a social child, like talkative and all that, and how could that be done in science?
It depends on the age of the child and the nature of the child. Now, what we do when we present things, we present them in silence or with minimal words at the youngest level. But as they get older, we do need to incorporate more language. And as lessons become more complex, there might be more words added to them. So it doesn't necessarily mean that everything is done in silence. That's usually just at the earliest ages. But thank you, that was an excellent question. So again, starting out with I put early childhood with the primary level, that's where we start with that. Elementary, and a lot of times, the older they get in the primary level, they are talkative, and they are social, and they are learning from each other. And that's okay, that's part of what we encourage as well. As long as they're not disruptive, that's all good. That's all good.
Thank you.
So, that time, anybody else? I should break now. Good question? Any other questions?
Yeah, can you just quickly talk about when you were like, we don't say good job, and don't, just can explain that a little?
Okay, yeah. So, the idea of not saying good job, and I know I grew up saying good job. I said it to my daughters until I knew better. One of the things that in doing so, a child is looking to us for approval, for evaluation, for us to say that we think what they did was good. What we want to encourage is, what do they think about what they did? And so at that point, we ask questions, they'll bring, do you like what I painted? Tell me blue right here. What was that? What is the blue? And this way you can engage them in conversation. Showing interest, you can be happy with them, but instead of saying, that's the best painting you've ever done, because then they're going to come to you with another painting and say, is this painting better than the one that I did before? And you've set yourself up for this constant qualitative evaluation of their work. We want to build that sense of confidence and intrinsic motivation to do things for themselves, not for us. Now, we all have grown up, and the world does change. We work at jobs. Of course, we need to get our jobs done, and we need to please those that we, hopefully we please ourselves in the process. I think that was one of the reasons why I got out of being an architect, because I wasn't feeling that in changing jobs, I now feel like, okay, I'm doing what is good for me. And I think that's an important part. Do you want to add anything to it?
That's something that is an everyday occurrence, especially in the lower elementary, that especially art, a lot of children come up and say, do you like my drawing? Do you like my painting? And I always flip it right around and just say, well, tell me more about it. Or, no, the question is, do you like your painting? Because that's we got to try to get that to be the most important part of what they're thinking, because they shouldn't be doing work for others. That's doing it for themselves, getting that love of learning intrinsic.
And it's so difficult. We are ingrained, it's so ingrained in us. I have a 5-year-old niece, and so this was the daughter of the sister who went to Montessori, and when she was born, as she was getting a little bit older, I kept saying to everybody, okay, I'm going to practice it right now, no saying good job, we're going to just break everybody of that habit right now. And it was amazing that my family really tried. I applaud them for their effort. They mostly do it when I'm around. They know never to do it, but I'm sure they're slipping it in there somewhere. But the best part is I would get videos of her, and she's on a scooter or something, and she gets to the end, and she turns around and she says, I did it. And that was the best part. She wasn't, how did I do? Did I do a great job? She came at the end and said, I did it. And so now watching her, I know that they're starting, it's very difficult, it's a hard thing to break. I taught a psychology class a couple of semesters ago, and there was a gentleman in the class who was, he had grandchildren and everything, and he was just saying, what do you mean, I've been saying this wrong all these years? I've always said good job. It's important we build up their confidence. And I said, it is important to build their confidence, but we want them to build their own confidence, not for us to tell them they have to have confidence. That needs to come from within. Which is a great lead-in to the five letters on your page under the word silence, where it says C-C-C-I-O. And there's all these variations of it. But I learned them as CCCIO. So those stand for concentration, can't believe I have to look at, coordination, confidence, independence, and order. If you need me to go through those again. Everything we do in Montessori, especially in the primary level, and even in the lower level, and the junior level, is geared toward this. We are trying to set children up for this idea of their own confidence, their ability to concentrate, right? And that concentration, sometimes that silence is important for concentration, but it doesn't have to be perfectly silent. You'll see a lot of things, you'll see teachers doing this for the pincer grip and holding a pen and all of those things. I remember a dad came in once and I said, look at our tree, and it had all these leaves on them. And I said, yes, the children can punch out the leaves. And he said, what does that mean? So I showed him, and I'm taking this little stylus with a pin at the end of it, and I'm poking it through the paper, and I punched out a leaf. And I perforated the whole thing so that way I could take the leaf out. And I said, all of those leaves. And he looked at it, and he's just like, all of those leaves? Because he thought that that was a really neat thing. Were done by the children, and by making these, I said, the amount of concentration it takes for them to do that and to stay, and the first time I had a 3-year-old pen punch, the holes were all over the place. That's okay. They're trying. They're going to get it. But it's that entire time that they're trying to practice. They're trying to get that coordination together in order to do that. We want them to build their sense of order. I don't know if you've ever, one of the things I just want to touch on, behavior. When children act out, they're trying to tell us something. And a lot of times I've noticed it's their sense of order has been changed. So if you have a regular routine and you change that routine on a child, they might get upset. And they're going to get upset because it's out of their sense of order has been changed. So by maintaining that sense of order, helping them become more independent. I had a parent come in once and she wanted to help her child with his shoes. So he would go like this and hold his foot up behind him for her to take her shoes off. I don't know if my children got home, they had their own things to do. Montessori stopped at our front door though, don't get me wrong. The best I could do was get them to divide their laundry into dark clothes, light clothes. We had a pink and red wash just because I didn't want that to dye anything else. The girls were really good at that. They could sort their clothes. But everything else stopped at the front door. But they knew. They were responsible. They were independent. They had to do their own, keep track of their own thing. So those 5 letters, those 5 words are key to everything we do, especially some of the activities we're going to get into right now, into the practical life activities. Before I do practical life, I want to go over something called a 3-period lesson. So before I was saying, critical thinking is about asking questions to get information, right? And we want to make sure we're getting quality information. Montessori lessons, especially in the primary years, are given with what's called a 3-period lesson. So, in our sense of order, the things I'm presenting tonight go from left to right. So everything in a Montessori environment, shelves will be set up from left to right, top to bottom, with the easier things on the top left and the more difficult things to the bottom right. And this way there's that progression, there's a sense of order. Those are some of those things that we build into our system, so that way the children also have this, and they start to understand these things. Let me see. Would you come join me for this lesson? Would that be possible? Somebody I know. spend a lot of time in the second period. Sometimes they'll need a reintroduction of the first period. But the second period, they'll spend time, when they're sitting with me, obviously, she's able to say, and the third child, she's able to tell me what they are right here. But she'll continue to practice that. The last question we ask is, what is this? What is this? So we go through those three questions. Thank you very much. We go through those. So the first one, getting a question, this is, so we tell them what it is. The second period, we ask, show me, and we review. And one of the interesting things when we do this, there are other little things that we do. If I have three things, the last thing I introduce will be the first thing I ask them to show me. So that way it's fresh in their mind. Okay? And that's one of the things that we use. There are all sorts of other things that we can play, little games. If you have children that come home and they turn these things over and they play knock knock, who's there? And then they need to name what the sound is. And you'll notice we do sounds. And it's not muh, it's bing. It's not tuck. We don't want to add an extra vowel sound to that. So, again, with critical thinking, those questions that we need to ask, the key to them is what to ask and when to ask them. So that way you know, if you introduce your child to something and all of a sudden you go right into, okay, what is this? What is this? What is this? And they don't know, you're going to get frustrated. So you need to help them with that, and you can review that with them, so that way they know. This is pure. Would you come and demonstrate the zipper frame?
When we were talking with the teachers about whether or not we should present different materials, one of the things in our classroom we've been doing so much lately are, excuse me, things with zippers. People can count to 100, but sometimes zippers are still tricky. And I'm going to do a commercial for our practical life. We have three areas, and the first one we introduce to children is practical life. Why? Because that's the bridge between home and school. And also, what we call dressing rooms are ways we can really help children be completely independent in a really practical way. You can put your jacket on, you can be ready for the playground, without any help. We spend a fair amount with zippers today. But again, when we do the zipper frame, we can practice. There's all different kinds of frames, like buttons, snaps, and that kind of thing. Anyway, zippers, are pretty tricky. So I'm going to present this, and I'm going to pretend there's a child next to me. If the child's right-handed, I'm going to sit on your dominant side. I'm going to smile, because this is going to be a good time. And what I was trying to do was break it down very, very carefully so they could see exactly how to do it. Let me practice it.
walk around and serve the apples. But since COVID, we've changed that a little bit. A lot of times children can eat this for themselves. One of the things that this does, we now talked about how many slices there are. So there are 8 slices. When we continue to the math area, children are introduced to fraction. This is a fraction insect, and there are 8 insects. When you think about at home, what are you doing at home that you can incorporate fractions? Obviously, cooking comes to mind, right? Simple cutting. If you can cut something in half, we're talking about fractions. If you can cut something, this is now cut into 8s, and you can start incorporating some of that. One of the things that, as an architect, I had to use were decimals, and we would talk about things in terms of percentages. We have things in, I forgot to ask for the junior level. There's the centesimal frame and the degree frame, so you can find out what percent these fractions are, and that will continue up through those grades. But this is where this starts, this introduction to thinking about math, and we're doing cooking. So if you made a recipe, you know you've encountered fractions. This is how we keep those things, continue those things from here to at home. And as Mrs. Fury said, practical life is where, or everyday living is where we start, because that is that connection to the home. I'm not going to demonstrate the rest of the materials, but I will show you some of the other things and see what connections you can make. This is not how we would clean this up, but that is it. And by the way, Macintosh apples are the easiest apples to slice. If you give children Red Delicious or Red Delicious, some of the other varieties now are a little difficult to do. But you can always slice the apple in half and then continue to have them use half an apple. Some of the other things they're introduced to in the primary years. So this is a rectangular prism. Not the best shaped one, but this one is an ovoid. It looks a lot like our ellipsoid, but this one's an ovoid. What can you do when they learn these? Scavenger hunt. How many rectangular prisms? What is a rectangular prism? What constitutes a rectangle? Because I've had children come up and say, oh, that's a rectangle. You're right, that side is a rectangle. There are 4 rectangles on this rectangular prism. Just so happens the other 2 sides are square. They don't have to be. They can all be rectangles. So have them go on a hunt and look for rectangular prisms in the house. Cylinders you can find. And then the ovoid. Everybody knows what that is. And that's a great thing to see if they can find. I once told a little boy when we were talking about an ellipsoid, we were looking at examples, and he was a big football fan, and he would go home, and I said, what? When you're watching football, tell your dad that there's an ellipsoid going through the air on that next pass. Of course, I got a call Monday morning and said, what are you teaching my son? Because he came home talking about an ellipsoid. Oh, what I wanted to do, when we get into the elementary years, they're going to learn volume and surface area. And how are they gonna learn if they already know what these are? And I remember my daughter distinctly telling me, you know what, Mom, I can derive, area and volume for things like this and this. And she said the really interesting one was, when they got to the ovoid, and she said in maybe the 9th or 10th grade, the teacher held it up and said, does anybody know what this is? And she yells out, an ovoid. And all her classmates are looking at her thinking she's lost her mind. And she said, no, it's not an ellipsoid. And she said, no, let me tell you the difference. So, and just some last things. Sorry for those of you who are to my back. So in the primary year, so when we start into the sciences in early childhood, we start by doing parts of an animal puzzle. And we have the parts of a fish, parts of an amphibian, reptile, bird, and mammal. These are all vertebrates, and they're introduced to that concept. As they learn the parts of them, they'll learn a variety of them, and then when they continue up to the junior level in elementary, they're going to learn about the timeline of life. And they're going to learn about when fish came about, and the amphibians, reptiles, the birds, and the mammals. And what this timeline tells us, starting with the very earliest part of Earth, if you look at this, and I'll leave this out, man doesn't come along into this timeline until all the way at the end here. And then when they get into the junior level, they learn about the amazing concept of the coming of Earth and how long man has actually been on the Earth. And part of all of this is what leads up to it from early childhood, from those primary years. And then similarly, when we introduce my favorite with the brown continent, how many of you have a continent map in your house? Does anybody have one there? Yeah. So I loved it. I had one parent, she had two of her sons, her two sons, she had a daughter there, but her two sons were in my class, and she started to wallpaper her kitchen with the maps that would come home. And it was quite a phenomenal display of her children's work. But as they learn about the continents, and they get more detail to each continent and all of the countries, think about how you can translate this to home. Any ideas? I know I'm throwing this out at you. Go ahead.
How we translate this? We have a puzzle and there's a continent on it, and Faye's dad was born in Russia. It has animals on it, so it makes it a little bit easier to discuss it. But we talk about where we live, which is a red squirrel, and then there's another squirrel where he came from in Russia, so we could kind of
That's great.
put it into context.
So if you travel, and even if you travel locally, you have a United States map, you have a Pennsylvania map, okay? If you have a map of this area, where is your home? Where is the school? There are things that they can start understanding. You know, if you travel, how are you traveling? Can you go from here to here by car? If you can, that's amazing, but, you know, it might get a little larva. There are things, there are ways to take all of this, to continue to ask questions, to continue to take those things home. So I want you to think now in that box, if you have some ideas, write them down about what you can be doing at home with your children. And also if you have questions, we can dive into that right now. But these are some of the things that we have in our environments and some of the ways that we encourage children to think and to ask questions and ways for you to continue those questions at home. So if anybody has anything some valuable questions, feel free to take a look. The timeline of life is always one of the most interesting things. And when people look at that, when children look at that, as they move, they can start to make these connections. Isn't that a wonderful thing? This Montessori, curriculum, all of these things they'll see over and over again. How wonderful a way to encourage them and to help reinforce their learning by seeing these things over and over. Pet care, really important. Have them be responsible. I know I was always supposed to be responsible for my dog at home. When the dog, I always had to take the dog out for a walk. Right now I have a cat that wants to go out. So when it was 29 degrees outside, I opened the door. I said, do you want to go outside? The cat was just like, I don't think so. So, easy to be responsible for that.
Can I just add something about the junior level, because it's a very different level than the early childhood. It's still the same materials and all that. But for example, for the timeline, it's really important that they start to be aware that they're not the only ones on this earth. And that's the whole thing about the cosmic or cultural sections of of this classroom. So knowing that, like, we have this other work called the long black strip, and we roll it, and it's like all black, all black, all black, all black, until like the very last part is red, and that's how long that the world has been around. But then the red is just humans. So realizing that they are in this world with all these different animals, and it's also our job to take care of the earth as well. So seeing that the fish have been on this earth, the first animals around, then it goes to the amphibians, reptiles, and then the last is the mammals, and the last of the mammals is the humans. So just wanted to add that from the junior level perspective as well.
And I love that work. I walk with it, and you keep walking.
You just keep walking, you just keep going, yeah.
Did you want to follow up
Yeah. So I think that we're going to continue to have some more Montessori workshops throughout the school year. We have a curriculum night coming up in January. I am not a Montessorian. This is my first venture into Montessori education, and I've learned so much from all of these amazing women in this room as a parent. I think I have a 5 and a 7-year-old at home, and I, walked into school on day one and was like, good job, you're great, that's awesome. Complimenting kids left and right, after and it's undoing 20 years of being a teacher and a principal, and it really has flipped everything on its head for me as a principal, right, and trying to instill that intrinsic motivation in kids and make them feel proud on their own, but also just as a parent, right? I think I keep buying my son, these teachers are gonna kill me, so I keep buying my son those shoes that just slip on, right? And he needs to learn how to tie his shoes. And they hate those shoes. They talk about it every time we talk about it, I'm like, oh gosh. But those are the little things, even just cleaning up after yourself, having them, I can't remember which of you gave me this advice at one point, but every space in your home should have a place that's accessible for your child. I think Carol, maybe you said that to me at some point. So that your child can help themselves to a snack, right? And I've really tried to embrace this side of myself. My daughter just last week was like, she likes to make peanut butter on Ritz crackers. Okay, I'm a little bit of a neat freak too. So I was like, just embrace the Montessori side of you and let her make her own, right? There's peanut butter like all over the counter. It's a mess, but she was like, look what I created. You know, this like messy Ritz cracker. But she was so proud of herself, and like, I just want to like commend all of these amazing teachers, because I thought I knew a lot about education, but this is just so eye-opening to me. Maria was like way ahead of her time. I think when parents ask a lot about like new math and the science of reading, like Maria has been doing all of this, and it's at the heart of Montessori. And so we look forward to doing more workshops about this for all of you. I think as a follow-up to this, we'll do a survey. You know, there's so many different aspects of Montessori classroom, both junior level and primary, that we want to kind of hear from you, like what would you like to learn more about, so that we can hone our next workshop in on this. So this is just a taste of like a general overview of a Montessori classroom and a glimpse at some of the things your kids do in the classroom. I know you see great things when you observe in the classrooms too. And then to those of you who don't have your children here yet, I welcome you to continue to come back and learn more with us, and visit our classrooms, talk to our parents here tonight who have had their kids in here, junior level or just starting with their kids here. You know, they can tell you about all the things their kids come home and talk to them about each day. So, teachers, anything else, or Erin?
I just want to say about the crazy peanut butter. What I think it's wonderful that you did that, and then guess what is another lesson? How to clean up. So I think that's also very important. People kind of forget, like, okay, you put the peanut butter on the. I also do that when we instead of saying good job, I like to commentate. You put the peanut butter on the crackers. All right, and see the little peanut butter over in the corner? Let's show you where we keep the paper towels in the house, where then when that happens again, you can just clean that right up. So it's also, yes, it's like, here's what you did, and it's wonderful, and then you can also, yeah, it's lovely. It is. It's so lovely.
Holy Kim tips. Okay. Does anyone have any questions or anything? Anything that comes to mind, or?
Well, I'd just like to comment, I'm a Montessori grandmother, and I didn't used to let my children help me in the kitchen too much, but I think an advantage of this program here is when you're nervous because you're in need freak or whatever, but if the children are doing a Montessori program in school, they're learning a lot of their skills at school already. So if you let them in the kitchen with you, you're surprised at what they can do and how well they can do it. So my grandson cooks with me, and he does a very good job at it. He's 4 years old. He's been cooking with me since he was 3. And I think some of that is because he learned skills. The other thing I want to comment on that I like is that they learn productive struggle with some of these things. I happen to be a school teacher. And I'm a middle school teacher, and I see kids in middle school that just give up. They never really learned the critical thinking skills and how to solve a problem on their own. And I feel like with the Montessori method, the kids are learning that, to figure things out for themselves. It's going to prepare them for education that's more advanced when they get older, how to handle things.
I have a question, kind of on that note. What do you recommend saying to a child when, say, they're reading a word and they say, I can't? What's the recommended response?
Yeah.
Sound it out.
Yeah.
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 We don't know. Yeah, sound it out.
Yeah, let's go through, break it up, what's the first sound? And thank you for bringing up the productive struggle, because when we say don't say great job, the way that we talk them through, you know, when you say take me through your process, what did you do first? You know, what worked, what didn't? When we don't say great job and we ask them those questions, that's the same way that we would guide them through struggle when it hit that point of frustration. So it's, when they do a really great job, you don't say, great job, you say, okay, take me through it. When something fails, you say, okay, take me through it. And it's the same process, so they don't feel like an immediate failure, because it's that same response from you.
And that all leads to that analysis. They're analyzing what they're doing, and that way they learn those steps, so that way they can get through all of those things that they might struggle with, and they don't give up. Because a lot of times children do. They're all looking also, I'm finding a lot of them, well, either you do it for me, or what's the fastest way to do this so I can get it done? That's not the.
That's one of the hardest struggles as a parent is not rushing your child, because you have places to go and people to see. But there's a child in my class who, as soon as he comes in, he just looks at me. I'm like, don't look at those eyes, don't look at those eyes, because you're going to be sucked in. And the thing, so what you do is you walk them through. What do you need to do? What's the first thing you need to do? And he verbally tells me, I'm like, and you need to do it. And now what? I'm like, you tell me. Because, right, he's so used to, like, all children at this age, they're used to, I can do this, we can go, we can do this. But when you, as soon as you walk in the classroom, that's when like, the mood should change. Like, I can do this, and we're going to be calm. A lot of times it's like, I can't. I was expressing to one parent, my daddy lets me, my daddy does it for me. I'm like, I'm good. Is daddy here? You can bring him in. And he's like, no. But sometimes levity with the child is realizing that they, oh, you're right. All right, I guess I have to do this. And that's the hardest part as a child that is 3, 4, and 5. They don't look at those puppy dog eyes. That's all I can say. You're going to be sucked in.
How do you wean a child off of like the good job and like all of that like, reinforcement when they're looking for it and like they're used to doing that?
Start asking those questions.
You're a therapist. How do you feel about it?
Tell me about it. What do you like? What do you see?
It takes time. It takes time, but with consistency and the effort on your part, it slowly changes. And then you start to hear, I did it. Or you start to see that confidence that you're trying to instill. But it doesn't happen overnight.
And asking about the effort too, and commenting on, you worked really hard on this project, and I can see your hard work. Can you tell me more about this? And can you yeah, it doesn't happen overnight, but.
Montessori, Marie Montessori uses this phrase, the aha moment. And when you see your child have that aha moment, that is when you're like, okay, it's got it. And it could take a month. It could, it could take 2 days. It could take an hour. Just have to be patient with it. And you look for their concentration while they're doing it. As soon as they look like there's a struggle, I usually walk over and just put my hand on them. And that gentle touch tells them they need to slow down and try again. And no words involved, just like, you got, it's like the calmness in your hand is feeding through them. And when you see that aha moment, it's like, I love that.
And when they start to struggle, sometimes don't jump in right away too. I mean, depending on, if you know the child, and you know your own children, but one of those things is observe, watch them. Are they going to try and solve it themselves? Let them try to solve it themselves first. And then, if they're really struggling, but some children you do need to move in. If they're going to, we don't want them to fear struggle. We want them to embrace that and know that there's support. So that guiding hand, that gentle hand, sometimes is all it takes. I mean, sometimes that's what we need, in a different way. little bit of a encouragement to keep going.
Our boys go to the same daycare, and the teacher there uses some Montessori components, but not fully. And I noticed Julian recently, like, kind of going like this with his eyes closed when he's doing a task, and he'll go, I can't do it. Like whisper to himself, and he doesn't say, I can't anymore, he says, I won't. So, yeah, it's not that he can't, it's that he thinks no, I won't, but it's just an interesting progression. You say, tell me more, a lot.
Thank you so much. And if anybody should be interested in changing careers,
Little plug.
you just never know. Something might spark you to want to change. Call it. Email me. Don't call me.
Thank you.